The life of a fire, from spark to inferno. Kind of dramatic, right? But it's true. We see fires on the news, we hear the sirens, but have you ever really stopped to think about how a fire lives? How it's born, how it grows, and how it becomes this, destructive force of nature? That's exactly what we're going to break down. So how does that happen? How does one tiny little spark become a totally uncontrollable inferno in just a matter of minutes? I mean, think about it. It could be a misplaced candle, a frayed electrical cord, something forgotten on the stove. It almost always starts small. But that journey from a little flicker to a whole room engulfed in flames, well, it can happen shockingly fast. Let's trace that path. It turns out, pretty much every fire, whether it's a small kitchen flare-up or a huge building blaze, follows a really predictable life cycle. There are 4 stages. It gets born, it grows, it hits its peak power, and then eventually it fades away. We're going to walk through each one. Incipient, growth, fully developed, and decay. All right, so let's start at the very beginning. A spark is born. This is stage 1, what's called the incipient stage. You can think of this as the fire's baby phase. At this point, the fire is just getting its bearings, it's really small, and it's usually stuck on whatever first caught fire. Like a piece of paper in a trash can or a kitchen towel that got too close to the burner. You've got some flame, a little smoke, but it hasn't really started to spread or kick off a ton of heat yet. Honestly, it might even just fizzle out on its own. Now this right here, this is the most critical moment. It's what you could call the golden window of opportunity. An incipient fire is at its absolute weakest. It's the easiest to put out. Sometimes all it takes is a fire extinguisher or even just smothering it. Getting it right now is the difference between a small mess and a total disaster. But what happens if you miss that window? Well, that's when we enter stage 2, the growth stage. And this is where things get really, really dangerous, fast. This stage leads to a terrifying event called a flashover. In the growth stage, the fire is like a hungry teenager with an endless appetite. It's just consuming more and more fuel. It sucks in oxygen, and it starts radiating serious heat. That heat preheats everything else in the room, getting it ready to burn. The plume of fire gets bigger, the smoke layer at the ceiling gets thicker, hotter, and trying to control it becomes way, way harder. And all of this leads to that critical tipping point I mentioned, flashover. The National Fire Protection Association, the experts, they define it as, and I'm quoting here, transitional phase in which surfaces exposed to thermal radiation reach its ignition temperature simultaneously. Whoa. Think about that for a second. It's not one thing catching fire and spreading to the next, it's everything catching fire at the exact same time. Okay, let's just put that in plain English. A flashover is when the heat in a room builds up so much that everything combustible, the sofa, the curtains, the rug, your books, it all bursts into flames at the same time. It's a sudden, violent transition from a fire being in the room to the entire room itself becoming the fire. And the temperature? We're talking a jump to over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit in just a few seconds. Let me be perfectly clear about this. A flashover is an absolutely unsurvivable event. Once a room flashes over, any chance of getting out of that space alive is 0. It's over. So after that flashover, the fire has hit its peak. This is the fully developed stage. This is the moment of maximum power, maximum destruction. In this stage, literally all the available fuel is burning. The fire's going as hot and as fast as it possibly can, and the only thing holding it back is how much oxygen it can get. The heat is so insane, it can actually start to destroy the building itself. We're talking melting steel and making concrete crumble. Yeah, at this point, as the experts say, the odds of effectively halting the fire diminish considerably. That's a very polite way of putting it. Fighting a fully developed fire is a massive, dangerous battle. For firefighters, the goal often has to shift from saving the property to just containing the blaze, to keep it from spreading to the next room or the next building. It's a purely defensive fight against an incredibly powerful force. But, no fire can burn forever. Eventually, it starts to run out of fuel or oxygen, and that's when it enters the final stage of its life, the decay stage. So in the decay stage, the fire is basically starving to death. It's eaten up most of its fuel, or the oxygen levels have dropped so low that it can't maintain that intense burn anymore. You'll see the flames get smaller, the temperature starts to come down. But don't be fooled. Just because the fire's fading doesn't mean the danger is gone. Not at all. The risk of the building collapsing or breathing in toxic gases from smoldering stuff, that's still incredibly real.
Okay, so we've seen the what, the 4 stages of a fire's life. But what about the why, right? Why do some fires just explode into these massive infernos, while other ones kind of fizzle out? The answer is all about what's feeding the flames.
See, a fire's growth rate isn't just random luck. It's all about its environment. Things like the interior finish are huge. Flammable wallpaper or certain ceiling tiles can act like a super highway for the fire. Then there's the continuity of fuel. How close is everything together? Is there an easy path for the fire to jump from a curtain to a couch to a bookshelf? Even the proximity to walls is a big deal. A flame that's right up against a wall can't pull in cool air from that side, so it gets hotter and grows faster. And of course, the materials themselves. How easily do they catch fire? That's ignitability. But there's also something called thermal inertia, which is basically how fast a material soaks up heat. Stuff with low inertia, like the foam in your sofa cushions, heats up and ignites scary fast. So let's just pull this all together for a second. Looking at this table, you can really see the story of escalating danger. It starts in the incipient stage, where it's deceptively small, and that's your best chance to stop it. Then it enters the growth stage, racing towards that point of no return, flashover. At its peak, in the fully developed stage, it's an overwhelming force of extreme heat. And even as it fades in the decay stage, those lingering hazards are still there, waiting. We've walked through the entire life of a fire, from a single tiny spark all the way to a smoldering ruin. And understanding this process is one thing, but knowing how to stop it is everything. So I want you to think about this. Right now, where you are, in your home, what and where is your first line of defense?